Let's get right into it. Number 10, the unwanted roommates. Alright, imagine this. You get arrested. Bomber. You're taken to the Tower of London. Okay, kinda cool, historical, wrong. You're taken to the bottom, to a special cell. It's pitch black, you're shackled, and you notice the walls are damp. That's because your new apartment is river adjacent. Specifically, it's connected directly to the River Thames, just below the waterline. This isn't a luxury feature. When the tide comes in, the water rises. And guess who else lives by the river and hates getting wet? Rats. Hundreds of them. The rising water forces them out of their tunnels and into your cell. You can't see them. You can't move to defend yourself. You just hear the scratching and squeaking, and then you feel them. It's the world's worst Airbnb review. 0 stars. View was terrible, roommates were bitey, and the whole place floods twice a day. Initially, this was just a punishment, but eventually, they just decided to make it a permanent checkout. They'd just leave prisoners down there for days or weeks until the rats and the river took care of the problem. Number 9. The world's worst yoga class. Oh good, we're still in the Tower of London. This place was basically the Disney World of human suffering. If you weren't getting nibbled in the basement, you might get an invitation upstairs to meet the rack. This thing was medieval Europe's favorite interrogation tool. The setup was simple, in that horrifyingly genius way. You're laid flat on a wooden frame. Your wrists get tied to one end, and your ankles get tied to a ratchet pulley system at the other. Then they just crank. It's like that big stretch you do in the morning, except instead of a satisfying pop, you get a symphony of your joints dislocating. Shoulders, elbows, hips, knees, click, click, pop. The whole point was to get a confession. And surprise, surprise, when your body is being turned into human taffy, you'll confess to anything. Did you steal the crown jewels? Yes. Okay, yes. Did you also turn the king's uncle into a newt? Yeah, sure. I am a wizard. I did it. Just please stop making me taller. Many people were left permanently paralyzed. One famous case, Anne Askew, was stretched so badly for her religious beliefs that she couldn't even walk to her next punishment, which was, of course, being burned at the stake. They had to carry her. Talk about a bad day. Number 8. The Barnacle Face-Scrub. Alright, let's leave London and head to the high seas. Life on a ship. The open air, the salty spray, the chance of being keel-hauled. This was a special naval punishment, mostly for sailors who stole or got too violent. It sounds kinda goofy, right? Keel-hauling, it is not goofy. They tie you to a long rope, one that was looped underneath the entire ship from one side to the other. Then, yeet, they throw you overboard. The crew on deck starts pulling the rope, dragging you down the side of the ship, under the keel, the bottommost beam of the boat, and up the other side. Now, this wasn't a smooth, quick dip. First, you're probably drowning. Second, the ship's hull is covered in barnacles. Think of it as a full-body exfoliation, only the exfoliant is thousands of razor-sharp shells, and the moisturizer is just more drowning. If the drowning didn't get you, or the blunt force trauma of your back breaking as you were dragged over the keel, the barnacles would shred you to ribbons, and if, by some miracle, you survived, congratulations, your prize was often a second pass, or just dying slowly from 1,000 infected cuts. Ah, Navy life. Number 7. The Pachyderm panic button. Look, most executions in history were unimaginative. Axes, ropes, whatever. But in India, they decided to get creative. For crimes like not paying your taxes or stealing, they didn't just fine you. They used the elephant. And we're not talking about a random, rampaging elephant. Oh no. These were trained execution elephants, controlled by a handler. This is where it gets weirdly specific, like a horrible restaurant menu. They had options. Method A was the melon pop. The elephant would just step on your head. Quick, efficient, messy. Method B was the slow roll, where the elephant would just walk over your whole body. Sometimes it didn't take on the first pass. Yikes. But the worst? The real artist elephants were trained to crush you slowly. The handler would direct the elephant to press its foot on your leg. Crunch. Then your other leg. Then an arm. All while you're, watching. Sometimes they'd use their tusks to pin you down while they worked. Emperors would apparently order mass executions this way for entertainment. It's like the world's most terrifying party trick. Watch Dumbo slowly dismantle this guy. And now, magic. Number 6. The Human Kebab. Okay, look, this list doesn't get nicer. You're still here, you're brave, or a little weird. Either way, welcome. Let's talk about impalement. You've probably heard of this one, thanks to that one vampire guy, Vlad, but he didn't invent it. The Egyptians were all over this, usually for robbers or rebels, and it's exactly what it sounds like, but worse than you're imagining. The fast method involved laying the criminal on their stomach, cutting them open, and hammering a giant, greased, sharpened wooden stake into their body cavity. The goal was to have it come out the shoulder, the head, or the mouth. Then they'd plant the other end of the stake in the ground by the side of the road, as a warning. But that wasn't even the meanest version. The slower version involved a stake that was slightly less sharp. They'd insert it just enough to hold the person upright, letting their own body weight do the work for hours or days. Imagine being stuck in rush hour traffic next to that. Honey, kids, don't look. Just don't look. Definitely makes you think twice about robbing a tomb. Number 5. The worst carpool ever, the Romans. They gave us aqueducts, roads, and Poena Cule. This one sounds like a fancy pasta dish. It is not a fancy pasta dish. This punishment was reserved specifically for people who murdered a close family member. The Romans really hated that, so they invented this just bizarre ritual. First, they'd sew you into a giant, airtight leather sack. Okay, bad start, but don't worry, you wouldn't be alone in there. For reasons. They would also throw in a dog, a rooster, a viper, and a monkey. Why? Who knows? Maybe they thought you'd all just debate philosophy. More likely, the terrified, panicked animals would immediately start fighting, turning the inside of that bag into a pitch-black, multi-species deathmatch. And then, once the chaos was at its peak, they'd throw the entire sack into the ocean. Later, they apparently gave prisoners a choice. You could either do the panic sack or get mauled to death by animals in the Colosseum. I honestly don't know which one I'd pick. That's a rough would you rather. Number 4, the rat-based internal investigation. Oh, you thought we were done with rats after number 10? You sweet innocent viewer. You underestimate human ingenuity. Humans loved using rats. This one comes in 2 horrifyingly invasive flavors. The first one, from around 1568, is the hot bowl. They take a live rat, put it in a clay bowl, and place the bowl open side down on the prisoner's body. Then, they'd start heating the top of the bowl. The rat, understandably, panics. It's getting hot in there. It's looking for an escape route, and the only way out is down, through the prisoner. It would literally burrow into the person's body to escape the heat. If that wasn't personal enough, there's the tube method. This one was reportedly used much more recently, during the Pinochet regime in Chile. They'd place a rat in a tube and seal the other end of the tube against the prisoner's, well, their exit-only orifice. The rat goes the only way it can. And here's the kicker. This was an interrogation technique. They were expected to answer questions while this was happening. How? How could you even form words? Number 3, the public nuisance Windchime. You know how some small towns have a weird statue in the public square? Or a quirky fountain? Well, 18th century England had this. It's called gibbeting, J-I-B-itting. After the Murder Act of 1752, it wasn't enough to just execute a murderer. You had to make a point. So after the execution, they'd take the body, or sometimes before the execution, while the person was still alive, and put them in a custom-fit, human-shaped steel cage. It was incredibly tight. You couldn't sit, you couldn't move. You were just locked in place. And then they'd hang you up, in public, by the crossroads or near the scene of the crime. If you were alive, you just hung there, unable to move, slowly dying of dehydration and exposure, while birds helped themselves. It's like being put in a full-body brace, but the brace is a cage, and your only doctor is the angry public. And they left them. The bodies would hang there and rot for years. It was a rotting don't do murder billboard. Records from the time show locals constantly complaining about the smell. Yeah, I bet. One guy's remains were apparently hanging around for over 20 years. That's not a warning. That's just bad decorating. Number 2, the world's stickiest sunburn. This one right here, is genuinely one of the most disgusting things ever invented. This is Scaphism, or as it's more simply known, the boats. This was an ancient Persian favorite, usually for murder. Okay, get ready. First, they'd take you and tie you inside a hollowed out log or a small boat. Then they'd put another boat on top, like a horrible human sandwich. Your head, hands, and feet would be sticking out of holes. Then, they would force feed you milk and honey, lots of it, and they'd slather your exposed face, hands, and feet in more milk and honey. Then, they just set you adrift on a stagnant, disgusting lake in the hot sun. You can see where this is going, can't you? What happens when you mix milk, honey, extreme heat, and you get explosive, uncontrollable diarrhea inside the boat, which you're trapped in. This mixture creates, let's call it a human chum bucket. It attracts everything. Every fly, wasp, bug, and worm in a 5-mile radius comes for the buffet. And you can't move. You can't swat them away. They bite, they sting, they burrow, they lay eggs. But here's the worst part. They didn't want you to die quickly. So they'd come back every single day to force feed you more milk and honey, just to keep you alive and prolong the process. One account claims a man survived 17 days like this. 17 days, covered in his own filth and being eaten alive. I don't have a joke for that. That's just, wow. Number 1, the set it and forget it prison. And here we are. Number 1, the worst of the worst. And it's so awful because of its simplicity. It's called the oubliette. It comes from the French verb oublier, to forget. This wasn't a rack or a boat or a cage. It was a hole, a purpose-built cell, usually pitch black, often shaped like a bottle, wide at the bottom with only a tiny hatch in the ceiling. You were dropped in. The genius, the evil genius, was in the design. The oubliette was built to be just small enough that you could never fully stand up straight, but the floor was just small enough that you could never fully sit down or lie down either. You were just stuck in a permanent agonizing crouch in total darkness, and then they just left you. They forgot you. Sometimes they'd keep you alive for years, lowering just enough bread and water to keep you conscious in that living hell. But most of the time, it was an execution. You were dropped in, and you'd slowly die of thirst or starvation, often surrounded by the bones and rot of the last guy. At Leap Castle in Ireland, they discovered an oubliette in the 1900s. It was filled with so many skeletons. They had to use multiple carloads to haul them all out. It wasn't a prison, it was a human discard pile. So, there you have it. 10 extremely good reasons to, pay your taxes, be nice to your family, and maybe not steal a loaf of bread in 18th century England. Humans are weird. We invented the telescope, and we also invented the monkey viper death sack. Wild. Anyway, if you made it through this entire video without feeling a little sick, or maybe because you feel sick, go ahead and hit that like button, and subscribe so you don't get forgotten when we drop the next video. See ya.